So, who likes balloons? Oh, come on. Right, I'm going to be handing out balloons, which you'll be preparing us for after lunch. Grab a balloon each. Of course, you're all way too above this kind of thing, aren't you? We're all adults here. Has everybody got one? Yeah. Who's missing one? Yeah, one more. Pass that down there. Okay, now you've all got to watch closely here. Has everybody got one? Okay, now what we're going to do is this is going to become Fascia dog. It's one of the best demonstrations I know of what we're talking about when we talk about fascia and how the body is built as a single continuity. Okay, now if you follow my lead, hopefully by the end of it we should have little doggy balloons. Occasionally we have other animals, some mutants, some not. So what we're going to start off with is take roughly about an inch here, okay, put your hand across it and fold it. Yes. So you roughly have an inch that side, 2 inches that way. Just fold it once. From the knotted end, not from the wobbly ends, yes? Just fold it and hold it for a moment, yes? And then all you're going to do is quickly do this. So you should end up with that. Got to do it quick. Got to hold both ends, that's it, you've got it? Yeah, so just make it, so this is the ears. Yeah, it should hold itself, yes. Straighten the ears up so they're pointing forward, yeah. There's always one. You don't get away with it though, we have plenty of spares. Okay. Okay, so has everybody got it now? Yes, that's it. Just turn once, that's it. That's lovely, lovely. Okay, so then when we bend the second one around, okay, another sort of inch, 2 inches roughly, and then do that. Yeah. So, oh, yeah, just turn, yeah. Quick. The quicker you do it, the easier it is. Yeah, that's it. And then just straighten the head round so it looks like that. Yeah, that's fine. We'll just turn the head round so the head's facing. Okay. No, just turn the whole thing around so you've got it facing. This leg's down. That's it. And then just turn the head now. That's it. Okay. Are we all there? Well done so far. Okay, the last one now. So you basically have the tip of the tail towards the leg. And then roughly, if you can get wherever you're going to do it, to roughly the same length as the first set of legs. And you should have a doggy balloon. Well, that's good. Now, he's looking up to the sky. I'm impressed. He's a stargazer, obviously. I'm impressed. Yes, very good. We've got a poodle there. Okay, show me hold up your balloons, please. I'm impressed. That's a very serious tail over there. I'm not quite sure where that blue one is. Were you listening at all? Very nice, very nice. Very pert there. Stargazer over here. I'm not quite sure how you achieved that. That's great. Okay, so, in seriousness. So, we all have now a doggy balloon, and we can define it quite easily by its head and its ears, neck, body, legs, etc. Now, we've basically just done this. He says, turning around. We have done what Andrea Vasali did, as we've given a bunch of names to a series of muscles or limbs, because he's decided I'm going to cut here and here, and we'll call that bicep, we'll call that tricep, we'll call this pectoralis major, etc., etc. All very nice, all very fine, functionally great. Okay, because, oh yeah, obviously there's a leg there. However, this is fascia dog. This means the inside of it, which happens to be air in this case, is your muscle. The outer coating of that muscle, the bag that the muscle is in, is fascia. And it is a single continuity around the body. This doggy balloon started life off as a single balloon. There is no separation. And as a body worker, if you're going to be reflecting on this leg over here, what makes you think you're not affecting any other part of the body? You're affecting the whole balloon. You cannot help but do it. And this is really important. This is what we'll be labouring on after lunch, is that we need to sort of somehow dump these muscle names for a bit. It doesn't mean to say they're useless, it doesn't mean to say they're wrong, but it can be certainly misleading, and from a body worker point of view, we need to start looking at things fascially as a single continuity. You have no problem in viewing your skin as a single unit. If you start saying, oh, well, that's a bicep skin and this is a deltoid skin, it's insane, isn't it? It's a single cloak. Your fat layer is the same. There's a fantastic piece of footage by Gil Headley who took off the fat layer as a whole single sort of sumo suit of an individual. It's amazing because it's a single suit, and at body temperature it's liquid, remember. It's held together with the fascial network, so it holds it in place, but at body temperature fat is liquid. Now, as a liquid system, when we go back to that first piece we talked about, that wet tropical jungle, view the body, particularly the fascia, as a liquid system, we then need to start viewing things and how we work as body workers in a different way, not just thinking about muscle, because before you even get to the muscle, you've gone through skin, you've gone through fascia, you've gone through fat. You've actually gone through several layers of fascia. Actually, you've got the superficial fascia and the deep fascia before you even hit any kind of muscle. So what makes you think you're working on muscle? You're not. You're actually working on fascia and fat, both of which are emotional layers, both of which have all these lovely mechanoreceptors inside them. They have an emotional response, which will then naturally have a knock-on psychological response, which will then also have a physiological response of some kind. And depending on the type of modality you're using, which mechanoreceptors have you up to hitherto been stimulating? Maybe you should be thinking about stimulating some of the others as well. It is a single continuity. There really isn't a bicep and a deltoid and a pec. They're really not there. They're not individual. And I will show you that later after lunch. And it is 12:30, so I am half an hour early again, I think. Okay. Yeah? Any questions? Yes, is it making coherent sense? Yes.
Yeah, when you said about, I can't remember now, I asked a question, sort of releasing the, like you want to punch something.
Yes.
You said something about stress, and I automatically thought if there's somebody in business, in a work environment,
yeah.
That's it, you said about the chess player using up as much energy
yeah.
as the Olympic athlete. So
yeah.
you automatically think, go away and play sport, but
yes.
the fact that they're sat at a computer desk stressing about stock exchange
yeah.
or whatever they do,
yeah.
Like, how would you sort of say you would sort of treat that, or how would you look at that from a fascia?
Well, think about what again. I suppose it's motive, isn't it? It's where it's coming from, isn't it? Is that if that guy, say, using up all his energy and he's enjoying doing the stock market, great. But he's using it. But again, it's motivation. If your body's in this fight or flight response, this sympathetic response where you're scared about, are you going to be able to pay the bills? Are you going to meet the target today, etc., etc. You're going to be releasing that adrenaline, but you're not physically using anything up. You're not using the adrenaline up. Yeah. Yes. It's perceived threat, which we then come back to placebo, don't we? Placebo in the proper sense. Everything is actually perception of the brain. But it's exactly that, is that what does your brain think about it? Some people can really love doing X, Y, and Z, and it can drive them. In fact, the stress itself, again, this is where the word stress is misleading. They can be technically putting the body under stress, but they can be really enjoying it, so therefore they're actually having fun, Now, this is a tricky one, is because, well, what stage is the body actually in? Is obviously it's very active, but actually, if you're really enjoying it, feeling good, actually, then you have releases of things like dopamine and serotonin, which then have a direct effect on sort of fascial and muscle tonality. In fact, all the sort of fluid dynamics across the board are changed depending on your perception of it.
So vice versa, people have injuries when they over sort of athletes or runners,
Yeah.
runners, when they have the compulsive need to go running.
Absolutely. Oh yes, and that happens a lot. There's an interest. Sorry, you were going to say, Joe.
Well, in terms of work as a whole, isn't there? There's a position of yourself in the company and the perceived level of control.
Absolutely.
Is the biggest stressor. So if you're top management, very often you feel like you can tell everyone else to do it. But like middle management basically tends to have, they've got to do a lot of things. There's a lot of work they have to do, but they have no control over it.
Yeah.
And is that because you could easily then change your perception to be focusing on what you can do, in which case you wouldn't get.
Yes, it's the half glass, half full, half empty thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
There was. I'm just trying to remember this one. It's Sapolsky talking about some studies done at a retirement home, I think, and it was looking at the nature of hope. Is that they saw that they brought in some young students to have conversations regularly with these people in the retirement home, and the levels of depression and neural activity went up, or rather depression went down, neural activity went up. General happiness of the retirement home was great. And this went on for several months, and they were doing this study of what happens with regards to the effects of dopamine and serotonin on the system, sleeping better, less falls, etc., etc. And there was general improvement across the board just with interaction. When it came to the end of the study, they noted that when all the people in the retirement home said, okay, this is the end of it now, they're all going, and they've obviously made friends and everything else. What happened was, what do you think? Did people go back to the same level? They did. The whole idea they'd been given hope and then it had been taken away is that actually people got considerably worse after they'd left. They'd actually not gone back to normal level, they'd actually got way down. So just a sense of hope can actually be a major player. So the perception of what's going on, perception is everything. It's a fascinating thing in itself. Again, the idea of placebo, again, we have placebo and nocebo. You can convince yourself it will work, and you can convince yourself it won't work. And they're very powerful elements. Never underestimate what the body thinks of something. But again, somehow it's undervalued within medicine. You can have two physiotherapists, and depending on what the client thinks of those two physiotherapists, you could be identically trained, really good at what you do, really good success rate, but depending on what that client will think of you will play a role of how successful you will be. It has to. Your relationship with that person, how you touch them, how you speak to them. Andy, I'm going to give you some abuse for a moment. Just stand up for a moment. Okay. Sit down. Okay. Stand up again. I said, dear chap, would you care to take a seat? Now, there's two things that went on there. One is his reaction. One is your reaction. Now, if he's a cell, again, cells react the same way as your whole body does. If I've actually just given it some aggression, yes, then the body has reacted in a different way, hasn't it? Is that I've ended up with him sitting down, but there may be a reaction coming the other way. Whereas by asking him nicely, he's working with me. And when I shouted at him, all the other cells in the room went, "Whoo." So they reacted as well. Your cells do the same thing as you did. There is something in terms of how you treat it, and this is where you could argue the differences between high velocity techniques versus other types of techniques, is that sometimes you do need a high velocity movement to make a correction. You can't get around it. But you also need to accept there is going to probably be a reaction coming the other way. You're dealing with the Pacini's receptors in that particular case. If by using a Ruffini response, if you like, by doing it gently, then you are going to get a different kind of response, not only with the thing you're working at, but the environment as well. So again, it's the right modality for the right thing, or do you actually start mixing and matching and working with different ways of approaching the fascia. Again, fascia is considered as being what's called a non-Newtonian fluid, is in the sense that if you've ever seen there's a Spanish game show where you have to run across a pool of cornstarch, which again is a non-Newtonian fluid. What happens is the harder you hit it, the more solid it is. If you don't run across it quickly enough, then you'll sink. So they have to stamp their feet. Yeah? Our bodies behave in the same way. You treat it badly or you use force, we stiffen up. Our fascia and our muscles get tense. You know, you push someone and it's like, oh. Whereas if you push someone very gently, then they'll actually go with you on it. Your body behaves in the same way. Now, there's a case of getting the balance of what are we dealing with here. Do we simulate the Golgi, the Ruffini, the Pacini, or the interstitial ones? What are we doing here, and what are we trying to get at? As different modalities approach things in different ways. Yeah? However, we come back to balloon dog. It is a single continuity. It is working as a whole. When we talk about holistic therapies, I'm using it in the proper sense. Holistic means the whole body. Now, if you're talking about the whole body, that means physically, emotionally, and psychologically. But you also have to then look at, as was pointed out by Kipling, the environment itself. Altmean of Croton says the same thing. You know, you have to look at the whole picture. And if you don't, then there's going to be a limitation to what you can do. This means that if you're looking at, oh, I've got a shoulder injury, so it must be the shoulder, because the client's saying, ow, my shoulder. Well, if pain is perception, and according to Professor Kerry Davis, he says the source of pain is never the problem. Now, that's a big statement. You think, well, surely if you broke your leg or something, well, the thing is, why did they break in the first place? Just because there's bruising? Well, the body already knows that. When that broke in the first place, it was a point of resistance, or it's the weakest link. Why was the body not able to adapt to that? Why is it that someone, say, that is drunk and falls off a cliff doesn't break a single bone, and I think the record is something like 27,000 feet, is because they're quite common in the Second World War, I believe. They're bailing out, they fall unconscious because there's not enough oxygen, and then they fall into a mountain and they're actually fine because they're so relaxed. Is that bone breaking is generally actually done by our muscles, not actually the impact of the thing itself. Is it our tensing? So people who are asleep in a car crash, very rarely actually get injuries. People who are drunk in a car very rarely get actual broken bones and serious injuries. The people who get the injured are the ones that see it coming and go, "Aah!" and everything's all tight, so therefore there is no movement for the body to adapt, and so therefore it just goes snaps like a twig. Not so, no. But then this comes back to, again, if you're not stressed and you're a bit chilled out, a bit 70s maybe, you know, if we're a bit more 70s, then perhaps we are less likely to be over tense. Maybe we'll get less pain. I've no idea how much chronic pain there was in the 70s. I don't know. Maybe it was all the dope they were smoking and they didn't feel a thing. I don't know, but, you know. Well, yeah, maybe. So, but again, and it's interesting there with, actually, it's a sort of a tangent, but it's interesting that LSD, because it's quite a serious toxin for the body, it was drawn away by the fat cells. So people who can still have echoes from LSD trips, it's because the fat cells are starting to break down and you end up getting a reoccurrence because it's in the fat cell. And the fat does what it does, it withdraws it. So when you start to lose weight, or you start to try and lose weight deliberately, unless you've got a decent intake of clean fats, then all that's going to happen is you're going to end up probably repoisoning your body. And maybe, in the case of if you've had a bit of misspent youth, you might have some interesting times while losing weight. Yeah. Anything else? Yes?
It's not a question, but it's maybe just an observation. I think also it's dependent, I don't know if it's the culture. If I compare with some people from like the third world country,
yeah.
I don't know what is stress me.
Yes, absolutely.
The vocabulary. It's also because we know already that, oh, it's so stressful. We already have anticipated
yes. Yeah.
that we are stressed a lot, and because we have everything,
yeah.
You see other people on TV who have nothing.
Yes.
They're always happy.
Absolutely.
It doesn't exist at all in your vocabulary that, oh, I'm stressed,
yes.
or I'm
yeah.
happy.
Absolutely. Well, even the concept of going out for a run for leisure purposes, you know, keeping yourself fit, would be an anathema to half the country. To think you're bonkers. Why waste the energy? I'm going to save it all up for when I'm going hunting or when I'm doing whatever. And the more you have, it is the whole cliche, but the more you have to lose. Therefore, that stresses you out. Because you've got to pay the mortgage, which represents a threat. Because if you can't do that, then that threatens your survival, doesn't it? And whereas if you already know what you have, again, I suppose I come back to the 500-mile walk. We were walking with only 8 kilos and we were carrying whatever we needed on our back. We were staying in basically sort of, hostels which were just bunk beds. It was very, very simple living, and in fact one of the key things I had to think about was water, because on these big open Spain places, just the accessibility of water, simple basic, was actually a big deal. And to actually focus the mind on those simple things was actually really quite de-stressing, as you just didn't think about it. As soon as you end up getting back home, our stress levels, in fact the last 3 days of the walk were the most stressful, because then we had to book flights, we had to get a car, all this other stuff, and it all came hurtling back. And you wouldn't believe the levels of stress. You think, oh my God, I live with this every day. This is insane. Because it's one of those things you have to think about. Oh, have I paid the bill here, there. The body's only got so many things to think about. If all you have to think about is a simple case of, we're not saying, all people in the third world countries must be overjoyed, but the fact is that if you've got simple living, then you have less things to deal with. If it's a case of putting bread on the table and that's pretty much your key number one thing, if you've done that, done it, tick. 1 tick for the day, Family's okay, food on the table, fantastic. 2 things to worry about. In the Western world, it's, what's happening in EastEnders, what's happened to Mrs. Miggins over there in Neighbours, is my border fence correct for my next door neighbours there? What sort of food am I going to have today? We get real picky, and then you go into a supermarket and you've got 20 types of choice. It's like, look, if antelope is the only thing you're going to eat today, antelope's the only thing you're going to get. If you're an Eskimo, if whale's the only thing on the menu, you're going to eat the whale. In Tesco, you've got 20 or 30 different types of meat. That's stressful in itself. Of which one shall I have? We are spoilt, and when you get spoilt, I'm afraid we get stressed, I would say.
I think also the task completion thing, I always wonder whether the whole thing when women were housewives and men went to work and men died much earlier. But if you think about a typical woman's day, well, that's extremely hard. There's tasks that you complete.
Yes.
And it's very simple, like you said, you complete you do water, you do washing, you do whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas in the modern world, that's kind of definitely changing with women working more. And also in the corporate world, obviously, very rarely do you complete something. It's normally like a 5-year goal.
Yeah.
Just a constant trickle of things that never get finished.
Which also, one could argue, and this is where we get into sort of a dodgy territory really, so all the ladies don't start to throw eggs at me. But there is an argument in terms of biochemically, we haven't really changed since sort of the caveman times really. And then, and this is one of the things you'd ask is there a hardwired thing where the men are supposed to sort of hunter-gatherer type stuff and the woman is supposed to be hearth and home type thing? That doesn't mean to say it's not, but at a practical, basic level, physically we're built different. In terms of the amount of energy that body takes for a woman to produce a baby, but then to expect them to do an identical job physically at the same time is a little bit insane. It doesn't mean they can't, but there is biochemically we're not really any different. And then you look at, what is it, Gaudigas says, it's another book called Primal Body, Primal Mind. She sort of goes beyond a Paleolithic diet type thing and looking at, and one of her key statements is, if it would have looked like food to hug the caveman, then it's still food now. If it wouldn't have looked like food to hug the caveman, then it still isn't. Keeping it sort of fairly basic and straight, and I would say the same way of living is, whereabouts do we get this balance between, at an animal level, how do we function, but at a cultural level, we obviously operate in a different way. It doesn't really make any difference what it is, but are you coherent with what actually we are hardwired to do?
Marilyn Benville wrote a book called Fat Around the Middle, and she's like an expert in female fertility and HRT and stuff. And I think she was praising that a lot of women, girls now, are taking on the body shape of men.
Yeah, it does. Yes, testosterone levels are going up as well.
It's
Yeah,
that whole kind of idea that they're changing
Yeah.
because of the change
Yes.
in lifestyle.
And the body will adapt to whatever you give it to do. If you're in a freezing cold country and you've only got whale, then you know you need to body to needs to deal with the temperature. Your body will adapt to circumstances. If you're asking your body to do X over and over again, the body will do its damnedest to complete that task. It is. What is it? I think the Spartans. It was one of those myths that the Spartans, the guys were all hunky and the women are all, you know, the beautiful, you know, Keira Knightleys and everything else. And yet this is apparently completely incorrect. Is that the guys were these Adonises because they went out and they fought and were at war all the time, so their bodies had adapted to that. But the women were actually continually pregnant and were actually fairly large, buxom women, which were considered beautiful in that particular time period, because that is what the body needed to be able to do that over and over again, is because you're producing more and more warriors. So the bigger the Spartan woman was, the better they were as producing new soldiers. Again, it's a different point of view, but again, your body will find a way of adapting to what you tell it most to do. If you are continually sat, then the body will develop a way of making you sit. If you're a golfer and you're a one-sided golfer, you know, then the fascial build-up will be one-sided. You won't be nice and even. Your spine won't be nice and straight because you're not asking it to be straight. You're saying, I want to be able to do a golf swing like this and as easy as possible. The body will lay down fascia to do that. If you're sat down all the time and then you suddenly say, oh, I'm going to do an hour's gym today, it's like, well, the body's not built to do the gym today, because actually you're telling it 8 hours out of the day that you actually want to sit down and be at a keyboard. If you're only doing 1 hour a day exercise, are you actually going to be helping the body, or are you actually going to make it more difficult? Are you stretching that elastic band both ways? The body's very, very clever, and we always underestimate it.